Hey guys, I'm Dov, and today I'm back with more Total War Warhammer 2 news. Yes indeed, we're here with a news update today. Going to be taking a look at some of the recent Tuesday Newsday updates that Creative Assembly and the Total War team have been releasing over the past month or so, starting with the Giant Slayers. Yes indeed, the Dwarfs are getting a new unit of Giant Slayers. For those of you who are curious, they are an anti-large, armor-piercing unit of Slayers. They are essentially Slayers with great weapons. And they are going to show the stat card here in just a moment, so if we go ahead and take a look, 0 armor as is expected. They are unbreakable as well, 40 speed, fast for a dwarf. They've got 50 attack and 30 defense, at least this stat card. Granted, take this with a grain of salt as it is subject to change before the patch actually releases. It looks like they've got armor-piercing, anti-large weapon strength with a 33 charge bonus, 60 unit models. Looks pretty similar to the Slayers that we know right now, except they have better attack, less defense, and armor piercing. Very, very good stuff, and I'll talk more about what this could potentially mean in a moment. If we go to the next Tuesday Newsday update, I'm actually going to be going a little bit out of order. Both of these are to do with the Dwarfs and the Slayers specifically, so I'm doing them back to back. The one that was just released today is Ungrim Iron Fist's start position in the campaign is being moved to Karak Kadrin, which he probably should have been in from the beginning. I remember Ungrim Iron Fist is probably the first campaign I played in Total War Warhammer 1 when it first released. He's one of my favorite characters for the Dwarfs, so awesome to see him flung out to his own unique start position and to give the Dwarfs another starting position. Always a good time. And again, I'll talk more about what this could mean in just a moment here. In terms of the other Tuesday Newsday updates, of course, we know Norska's coming at some point this month in May, and Creative Assembly has shown off. They've got new monster hunts for each of the new races. You're going to be fighting a Hell Pit Abomination, a Hydra, a Phoenix, and a Carnosaur, I believe was the first one. So very, very fun stuff. It's good to see that they're keeping the Old World races up to date with the New World content. It's always good to see. And then they're also going to be reworking the food mechanic for the Skaven in-campaign, which is always good to see. You know, the Skaven food mechanic, I have played a Lord Scroll campaign pretty extensively in my free time in the Vortex map, and I definitely think that it has some issues. The food, I didn't find to be a super big issue. Granted, Scroll does start closer to some food sources, at least initially. In the late game in the campaign, I found it was very, very hard to get consistent sources of food. So I'm a big fan of this change. I think it'll make the Skaven campaign a lot better. And I just wanted to briefly talk about what we can expect for other Old World races going forward. You know, I think that the Giant Slayers and the fact that they're moving Ungrim to Karak Kadrin sets a really nice precedent for the Old World factions going forward. So I'm going to take just a minute to talk about that today and kind of go through some different things with the Old World factions and talk about what changes they can make. If we look at the Giant Slayers, moving Ungrim to Karak Kadrin, I can't imagine is that difficult at the end of the day. The Giant Slayers are a new unit, which in and of itself is significant, but they're a new unit that, number one, the animations already probably existed for. Number two, the skins, the weapons, all the base assets for them already existed in the game, more or less. And so it was something that was very easy for Creative Assembly to implement. So I'm going to be going through a few different suggestions, more or less, or you could call it speculation or predictions of things that I see that would be easy for Creative Assembly to do and would also add a lot to the Old World races. So we're going to start today with the greenskins, and I'll go ahead and cut this other music out here so we're not overriding the game music. And yeah, the greenskins. So the greenskins have a few issues, as I've detailed in recent videos. Mainly one of their issues is armor-piercing anti-large. To that effect, I think you could do a couple of things. First, not necessarily armor-piercing, but a basic anti-large variant of Orc Boys. We've seen over the past while tons of different weapon variations of various types of infantry, and in the tabletop you could take Orc Boys with a variety of weapons, including spears. So I think Orc Boys with spears is a no-brainer for the greenskins. Give them a nice, cheap, anti-large option that also has a shield and, you know, would definitely fill a role there. In terms of weapon variations, I think a Black Orc variation with shields would be an awesome unit for the Greenskins. They really don't have any effective defensive type infantry. Now, granted, you might say they're Greenskins, they're not meant to be defensive, and I would concur to that to a relative extent, but I think from a tactical standpoint, Black Orcs with shields makes sense. It's a unit that the Greenskins would find very useful, I think, especially even if you don't make them necessarily have like charge defense or anything like that, just decent melee defense, solid overall weapon strength with not a majority of armor piercing, obviously, but high melee defense, high armor, and high leadership with immune to psychology would make them a very strong anchor unit for the Greenskins. I definitely think that that's another unit that would be easy for creative assembly to implement, and so it makes sense. Likewise with the Orc Boys with spears. Now, some other things that might take a little bit more work would be an Arachnarok mount for the Goblin Great Shaman. This would give the Greenskins another monstrous Lord mount choice, and also make the Gobbo Great Shaman suddenly a very interesting character. I believe it is appropriate to lore. I forgot to mention the Black Orcs with shields are also appropriate to the tabletop. In tabletop, Black Orcs could actually carry all their weapons at the same time, which is a little bit hard to implement in the game, but I do think different weapon variations would at least go to help fill that niche a little bit. Likewise, with the Arachnarok Queen with the Gobbo Great Shaman, it's something that's lore appropriate to the tabletop. You could take an Arachnarok mount for some of the Great Shamans, the Goblin Great Shamans, so it would give him some, extra terror options, poison, armor piercing, another monstrous lord, which goodness knows there are plenty of those already in Game 2. The Greenskins just don't seem to actually have any, besides the Wyvern, which in and of itself is not the greatest monster in the world, so I definitely would like to see the Gobbo Great Shaman get that Arachnarok mount. I would also love to see some more hero choices for the Greenskins. Right now they probably have some of the least hero choices out of any faction in the game, outside of a handful of others, but what we really need is an Orc melee hero that has armor piercing and preferably anti-large, similar to the High Elf Noble and the Tomb Prince, and some of the other, the Saurus, Scar Veteran, some of the other melee heroes that have come out in Game 2 with this armor-piercing anti-large. The Greenskins definitely need someone that fills that role, and that would go a long way to helping them with that armor-piercing anti-large issue that they have. So, yeah. My other suggestion would be in the same vein of moving Ungrim to Karak Kadrin. Azag should probably be moved to the Red-Eye tribe. It would be more lore appropriate for him, I feel, considering he's from Troll Country, and that's the closest Greenskin faction to Troll Country. It would make sense for him to go up there. And that's pretty much it for the Greenskins. So for the Empire, there's a lot you could add, obviously. There are tons and tons and tons of characters. I'm not going to really go into that too much. What I would like is Boris Todbringer to be playable. He's already in the game. Middenland is playable in multiplayer. If we go here, we can actually select them. Whoop, not the Lizardmen. Middenland. And Boris Todbringer is playable. You'll notice the Middenland roster is missing some units as compared to the regular Empire roster. I think that gives them an opportunity to flesh out some new units. So, for example, Knights of the White Wolf are a unit of Cav, obviously, Knights, for the Empire that are a great weapon cavalry unit. Similar in role, I would imagine, to Questing Knights. That's how they would play in the game, at least. They're lower armor because they don't wear helmets, but they do have a, I believe they carry two-handed Warhammers. And they're another Cav option, so it would be kind of a mid-tier armor-piercing Cav option for the Empire, and specifically they're based in Middenland. So if you were to make Boris Todbringer playable, it would make sense to implement the Knights of the White Wolf. Most of the assets for them are in-game already. They might have to create a few unique things, but for the most part, I mean, the animations are there, most of the assets are there. It's a no-brainer for the most part, especially if they're going to implement Middenland. And another unit that's a no-brainer would be Huntsmen. I see Huntsmen playing out a little bit differently. Obviously, you want to differentiate them from the existing skirmishers for the Empire. So I see them as a higher tier skirmisher, maybe even like 750 or more, with 360-degree firing, firewall moving, and maybe stock, maybe not. Maybe they have an activatable ability that activates stock. But similar to like a Deepwood Scouts or, other type unit. I'm trying to think if there are any analogs, but just similar to a Deepwood Scout in role. Maybe you give them a small anti-large bonus on their missiles just to make them extra focused at taking down monsters. But again, another very lore-friendly and thematic unit for Middenland. And then, yeah, that's more or less my feedback for the Empire. It would be nice to see something like an elite tier infantry, like an Imperial Foot with halberds. Right now, the Empire doesn't. I mean, their low tier infantry is pretty cost effective, but anything past flagellants, halberdiers, and greatswords are all not wildly cost effective. So I would like to see maybe one more elite tier, really cost effective elite tier infantry added in there in the Imperial Foot, which are basically Reichsguard dismounted. I believe they can carry a variety of different weapons, but it would be really cool to see them with halberds or even a sword and shield for another, another high-tier defensive infantry in the same vein as Black Orcs with shields or, you know, chosen sword and board, iron breakers, that sort of thing. So that's more or less all my feedback for the Empire. Not really too much to say there. The Vampires, likewise, don't really have a whole lot that's going on with them. They don't have a whole lot that's missing. The main units that are missing are the Spirit Host, which is like a low-tier ethereal unit. I would see them playing probably around 400 to 500 points as an expensive meat shield. But they're going to be a lot more durable than Skeleton Warriors or Zombies because they're ethereal. They probably wouldn't cause terror because that could cause some balance issues if you had a unit that cheap that could cause terror. Cairn Wraiths are already pretty cheap for the amount of terror they cause. You can also take a Banshee and some other really cheap options to get terror as the Vampire counts. So I don't think they should cause terror, but another cheap meat shield option for the Vampires is always welcome, and it could allow you to go even more effectively into the full-on ghost builds, which don't really work, but they're fun. In terms of the rest of the Vampires, I mean, they do have two different start positions. Granted, they're right next to each other in terms of the world, so it would be nice to get one other start position somewhere else in the Mortal Empire's map, just to give a little more variety. And it would be nice to see some more bloodlines as well. You know, like we have the Strigoi and the Von Karsteins, but it would be nice to see some of the other bloodlines as well. There's not a lot else for the Vampires. Like I said, they're in a pretty good place. Beastmen, they're one that I think could use a little bit of love. A Doom Bull probably wouldn't be that hard of a lord to create. You would just need to more or less create a new mesh and texture for him, I would imagine. You could probably just use the animations from the Gore Bull. But a Doom Bull would give you a nice, super hard-hitting, anti-large armor-piercing lord. And you could also get the Gorgon, which is another big single-entity monster. It's more of an anti-large focused, if from what I've heard is correct. And so that would be another nice option to add in as well. In complement to the Giant and Cygor, you could have a Gorgon, maybe 1800 or 2000, that could then 1v1 with things like Shaggoths, Necrosphinxes, you know, the Carnosaurs, in that same tier of monster, if you will. And that's pretty much it. It would be nice to, again, move one of the Beastmen Lords, or even if we could get another Beastmen Lord, that would be great. I really don't see new Legendary Lords happening too often. I think that's going to be something that's a little bit harder for Creative Assembly to implement rather than just units or generic Lords or Heroes, because you have to create quest battles, items, all this different stuff when you're creating a Legendary Lord. So I'm focusing more specifically on implementing, I mean, if a Legendary Lord's already in the game, that's one matter. That's why I suggested that that Boris get his own playable faction, which I think is something that Creative Assembly is potentially looking at. I mean, it would make sense for them to do so. But likewise for the Vampires, if you could move... I'm going to go back to the Vampires for just a second in terms of the Lords, but if you could move Kemmler to Musion and make the Red Duke playable, that would give them another starting location. Likewise for the Beastmen, if you were to move Morker over to Nagaron, or maybe you move maybe Malagor over to the Southlands or to Lustria, you know, somewhere so that the starting experience is a little bit more varied from Legendary Lord to Legendary Lord, because right now for the Beastmen and for many of the Old World factions, it's more or less you start in the Old World, maybe in a different position in the Old World, but it's still in the Old World nonetheless with a lot of these different factions. And I mean, yes, moving Kemmler to Musion and making the Red Duke playable, that's still in the Old World, but you're on the other side of the Old World where you have access to the sea. You can immediately go set out and try and conquer Ulthuan, or head down to the Southlands or Lustria or whatever. So I do like having the different start positions, and I think moving one of the Beastmen Lords out somewhere else would help, and moving Kemmler to Musion would also help. In terms of the Wood Elves are one that I'm probably going to need to make a dedicated video about. They're one of the few factions in the game that only has 2 Legendary Lords, so another Legendary Lord, if any faction is going to get them, I think the Wood Elves should be the one to do it. They just need a campaign overhaul. Like, I don't really know how else to put it, but the Wood Elves campaign mechanics were designed around a system that no longer exists in terms of the regional occupation. So I think that Creative Assembly needs to take a look at the Wood Elf campaign and potentially do a major overhaul about how you acquire amber, you know, how you can go about doing different things, what kind of buildings you can build in your outposts, or maybe they just scrap the outpost idea entirely and say you can build up actual cities. You know, it's tough because I do agree that that the Wood Elves should stay put in Athel Loren and try and defend that and kind of build it up, but how do you tie that into this massive Mortal Empires map so that it feels meaningful when you go out and explore, and you don't just have to paint the map, you know, in trees, although I'm sure Durthu would be happy about that. But yeah, the Wood Elves are in a weird place. I'm not going to talk too much more about them just because I think they may need more major changes than anyone else. Bretonnia is in a pretty good place. They have several different start positions. Granted, they're all in Bretonnia, but you know, you have north, middle, south. I don't really know of where else you could put them. In terms of missing units, I mean, Bretonnia is not missing any that I'm aware of. They even had to make up a few units, Creative Assembly did, when creating Bretonnia's roster. But in terms of something that they could add to the roster, I could see a unit similar to Aspiring Champions. That's like a unit of Grail Guardians on foot, very low in number, maybe only 15 to 18 of them, but they give maybe a special AoE leadership effect called the Virtue of Empathy, that if you stack that with the Grail Relic, maybe you get like a massive leadership to your front line, and all of a sudden these peasants, which would normally rout very easily, when you combine the Grail Relic with those foot companions, then maybe they could hold for a much longer period of time. I know some people will cry, you know, that's not lore friendly or whatever, but you know, I just think from a gameplay mechanics standpoint, if you made them so that they weren't a good offensive infantry, they're a defensive type unit and they're a leadership support, very much like the Aspiring Champions. If we take a look here at the Warriors of Chaos, we can have a look at the Aspiring Champions stat line, and something similar to this with very high melee defense, decent attack and weapon strength and splash attacks, but very high melee defense, magic attacks, and armor. I think very similar unit to these Aspiring Champions would be a super cool unit. Not only thematically, but also give give Bretonnia another tool in their toolbox. And Chaos themselves, I'm going to give a pass because obviously we're expecting Game 3 to hold a lot more for Chaos, whether that's just demons, whether that's new stuff. And I'd imagine some of the stuff that they're making for demons is also going to be applicable to the Warriors of Chaos, like the Skull Crushers of Khorne, which are red, which are ridden, I guess, by both warriors and demons. So like there are some units that are coming down the line that I think could potentially be added to Chaos, but they probably won't be until Game 3 comes out. So I'm going to give Chaos a pass right now and not really talk too much about them. We've pretty much talked about everyone else in terms of the Old World factions, so a little bit of news and speculation as to what could be coming. I think that a lot of the things I've mentioned here are things that would be easy for Creative Assembly to implement and would not take that much time or money to do so. And so I think that there are things that could be feasible. I also think that these are things that would add a lot to the game, that would give some nice variety and flavor, and maybe give some factions some tools that they really need to be able to perform well in multiplayer. So let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. What are you expecting to see alongside Norska when it releases? Give me your thoughts. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you appreciate this kind of news type content. Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. If you do enjoy watching, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button, and we'll see you next time.